their YouTubes and their avocado toast.
Okay, Boomer.
You kids don't know how good you have it.
Okay, Boomer.
I remember when things were simpler back then.
Okay, Boomer.
Okay, Zoomer.
And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever episode of Okay Boomer, Okay Zoomer. I am your host, Ghantt Chart, and with me is my co-host, my father, the ever-famous Daddysquatch.
Good morning, Ghantt Chart. Good to be on here.
So anyways, today we're, trying out the first ever podcast of Okay Boomer, Okay Zoomer. Now, a lot of you are probably confused about what exactly this podcast is about. And the whole point of Okay Boomer, Okay Zoomer is basically sort of a podcast where people of, like myself, of the Gen Z can sit and talk with people with the Boomer generation, such as my father, of things that are specific to our generation, and also kind of like bicker about those damn kids and their YouTubes and their avocado toast.
Well, yeah. I agree. I think that definitely in today's society, we take a look at when we were your age or kids and how we did things. It's very different than today. I mean, our biggest discussion point has always been cell phones. I grew up without cell phones. We had one, maybe two phones in the house, and we weren't connected that way. Whereas today, everybody's got their phones and their noses in their phones. So I always kind of laugh about that. Could society last today without the cell phone?
So today's episode, we are going to be discussing vacations, since it is the end of the year, as you are probably well aware that, that when we're recording this and whenever I'm getting this out, we are recording this on Labor Day. And as a result of that, we decided to talk about the differences that we've had in vacations as things have gone on over the years. Like my father and I, Daddysquatch, we typically like to take a lot of trips out to Colorado to visit my sister, my brother-in-law, and now my nieces and nephew, who, very lovely people, we love you all, as well as get an opportunity to get to see the beauties of Colorado.
Well,
but get to see the beauties of Colorado, the mountains, the spectacles, the weird tourist traps that manage to suck money out of your pockets. So tell me, Daddysquatch, what would you say is the weirdest tourist trap that you've seen out in Colorado?
well, not as much as Colorado is getting to Colorado. So in the states between where we are to where it takes us to get to Colorado, there's always a bunch of different tourist traps. Now, they're not as many as there used to be. So our family, when I was growing up, we'd make a cross-country trip to visit relatives. And half the fun, or most of the fun of the trip, was not as much seeing the relatives, but traveling to get there, because there were always these cheesy tourist traps. One that is still today and that we were just recently at is probably one of my favorites is Wall Drug.
Yes, Wall Drug. So, let us talk about Wall Drug and all the fun things that we've done when going to Wall Drug. And thankfully for all of you, you can still go to Wall Drug. It's the simple place of, and I can't believe that this is like their big selling point, is like you could pull over for free water.
Yeah, that was the big thing, that when people were starting to drive in the early part of the nation, with automobiles, that was their big thing. If you wanted to cool off, because Wall Drug's located in South Dakota. It's kind of in a very arid part of South Dakota. It gets very hot. So if you wanted to cool off in the old days, you'd sit there and get free ice water. Well, now they've gone from that to coffee to now the drugstore there is basically a bunch of touristy little shops in there that you can buy all sorts of knickknacks.
True. I mean, like when I went to, because I've been to Wall Drug a bunch of times, you've taken me to Wall Drug, and you would see all the different touristy kind of little things. You got your giant jackalope that you can, climb atop of, and basically take a picture if you ride in the jackalope. There's a giant T-Rex, a giant animatronic T-Rex for the kiddies to see.
Well, you should tell them what a jackalope is.
So, for those of you who don't know, a jackalope is basically a rabbit with deer antlers on its head. Basically, the epitome of a biological abomination.
But it is kind of like a mascot of definitely the middle part of the country, especially in South Dakota. And if you go at nighttime, right before the sun sets and it gets dark out, you always can hear the call of the jackalope out there running through the brush.
That, or probably just some rabbits or something like that. Because, this is something that I actually asked on Reddit at one point, which was asking the question, on Ask Science, which one of the questions I was asking, which was, could a jackalope exist? What if the jackalope was real? And at least one person said, well, it wouldn't be exactly practical to have a jackalope with a bunch of antlers, to have like a rabbit with antlers on top of its head. It's not exactly a practical thing for a rabbit to have.
Now, another thing that even a cheesier spot that we've gone to once or twice in there, and it was a little out of the way of Colorado, but you could still get to Colorado driving through this area. It was called Hell's Half Acre.
Hell's Half Acre. I have never been to Hell's Half Acre. Tell me about Hell's Half Acre.
Well, you have been, but you were younger when we did go to that. And Hell's Half Acre is a place in Wyoming that you can pull over, look down in there, and it is probably the most desolate looking landscape that you've ever seen. So if you ever watched the movie Starship Troopers, you see we're on the one planet that was filmed in that area. So it's very, it's almost alien to look in there. But if you look down into the canyon downward there, and you look into one of the caves there, you'll see a plywood cutout of the devil. So the devil is right there waiting to greet you into hell at one of the areas to get into it. But again, it's one of those places you just pull over and it's cheesy to go to.
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about a place in Colorado, not Detroit.
Well, it's a place in Wyoming. But when we're talking about Wyoming, there's another place we did take you to, Colin, was Thermopolis.
Thermopolis.
So Thermopolis, another place in Wyoming, you can go there and they have the dinosaur museum. And then you can go to the museum, and then after you go to the museum, you can go out to the dinosaur dig. Explain the dinosaur dig.
Okay, so there is this area called the Morrison Formation, which is famous for having a bunch of Jurassic fossils, and we actually went up there and actually got to see a Camarasaurus skeleton, and, you would take this bus ride up there, and, it's nice to see the Camarasaurus skeleton, but, oh dear God, the bus ride up there is nerve-wracking, it's very much on the side of a cliff. You're just like, oh dear God, if this thing falls over, I'm going to die.
It's not even a one-lane road. It's kind of like a 3/4 lane road. And the bus driver going up there is telling you all sorts of stuff, and he's really not paying attention. And there's no guardrails, and it's a long drop. You just look ahead, and you're just like, yeah, okay. But,
yeah.
So there's other places. There's some very beautiful things to see along the way, too. But if you go through one of my favorite states to drive through, Nebraska, near Kearney, you'll see this. They converted an overpass over the highway to look like a fort.
Ooh, yeah, I remember seeing that. They're talking about that little museum that was like a bunch of metal, put together to make it look kind of like a fort.
Yes.
It was once a...
And it's right over the highway. You can't miss it. When you're driving through Kearney, there it is.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's definitely the epitome of modern art. And I do have one tourist trap, which I did talk to you about, or that I did take Daddysquatch, as the name implies, to. And that location is, of course, the Bigfoot Museum. So, tell me what your thought is about entering the Bigfoot Museum in Bailey, Colorado.
Well, Bailey, Colorado is quite an interesting place to get to. So if you're in the Denver area, it's about a 45-minute drive outside of Denver. And you go up the mountains, you go down the mountains. You go up the mountains, you go down the mountains. You go around the mountains, and then you come down this long mountain pass, and right at the bottom of the pass, there's Bailey. And Bailey is not that big of a town. It's maybe 500 people in the town and stuff. And back away from the highway, about a block, there was the Bigfoot Museum. Now, I was kind of curious to why they had a Bigfoot Museum in Bailey, Colorado, but found out that in that area has had numerous Bigfoot sightings. Now, you go in there, and for a museum, they don't charge to go into it if you just want to buy a gift or take a look at their wares. But they do have an area for $5 to go walking through the museum and see their stories, their footprints, their hair samples. But in one room, there behind the thing is a Bigfoot.
Yes, a animatronic Bigfoot that I have to clarify on this. People thinking, oh my god, they have like a Bigfoot. It's like it's an animatronic, But, to be fair, you do get like little displays that sort of explain different things that they talk about regarding the legendary Sasquatch. And one of the things that they talk about is the classic, is apparently Bigfoot likes to braid the hairs of horses, which I gotta ask, if you're a Bigfoot, why are you braiding horse hairs?
Why not?
Well, it just seems kind of weird, Like, again, we have this idea of Bigfoot being this hairy primate in the middle of the woods, just, doing its own thing, and, it's starting to braid horses' hair, like, why?
We will save that for another episode.
Oh, yes. We will save that for our Bigfoot episode, which we will do at some point. But, yeah, the tourist attraction was very nice, although if there is one thing I would like to complain about is the fact that when I was using the bathroom, they have a picture of a Bigfoot staring directly at you, which does not seem very nice, to think about. To think about Sasquatch, staring at you while taking a crap.
Yeah, I would say the people that were in the museum had a little sense of humor.
Yeah.
And stuff. But I would say if you're in the area, go stop by. It's a fun little place to go to. But if you go throughout the United States, you're always going to find different types of tourist attractions. But it seems they're not as many as there used to be as far as just kind of quick little easy place to go to. I know as a child when we're traveling cross country, we went through North Dakota. And in North Dakota, as you're driving down the highway, there's a town called Jamestown. And Jamestown, just outside of it, is this big, huge statue of a buffalo. And my dad would always stop there and have us take pictures as kids. So my dad had a kind of a unique sense of humor. And the way the tail on the statue was, he would have us all kind of stand underneath a certain spot. And it looked like the buffalo was pooping on us. But that was my dad.
Rest in peace, Grandpa.
Yes.
I think another tourist attraction, so it's one of those tourist attractions where it's like, you don't, go into it, but it is funny to look at. Like we would drive back and forth between that little plains region of, North America. It's this one area which is like a ghost town, or, quote unquote ghost town. It looks kind of like a Wild West town. I think you said that it was like the filming site for the movie Dances with Wolves.
Yep, in South Dakota.
But I always got a kick out of what the sign, outside for the town was. Like, you have, 30 people, 100 ghosts. And then there will be a bottom sign that says 2 rabbits, crossed out, 4 rabbits, crossed out, 6 rabbits, 8 rabbits, 32, 64, 128. You gotta have a little sense of humor with it.
Yeah, that's the whole interesting thing about when you're going across South Dakota. It has a lot of these little tourist things. But definitely Wall Drug. They started advertising it in Minnesota as you're driving there, and you'll see a sign about that, or Mount Rushmore and the Burglum story, or whatever that guy's name. The guy that did that created Mount Rushmore. But so don't sit there and stay in the house all summer long. Go take a trip.
Hey, do not badmouth me. I stay in the house because nature and I don't get along very well. As you probably heard me sniffling, I'm still recovering from allergies.
Yeah, just wait till it gets cold enough and it kills the mold. That should be in October sometime.
Yeah, thank God. But there's another reason why we like to go to Colorado, aside from seeing your grandkids, my nieces, my nibblings, and getting a chance to also try the different Colorado beers.
So, one of the things I like to do is I like to brew beer.
Oh, yes, definitely. My father, Daddysquatch, likes to brew beer, but another thing is he likes to sample beer because no two beers are ever the same. There's always like a different variations of beer.
Yep. But it's interesting to sit there and go in and have one or two cold beers at some microbrewery. One, I like to support the microbreweries. It's a nice change of pace. Instead of a bar atmosphere, you go to a microbrewery. They're out there crafting their beer. It's usually an interesting experience going in there. Some will have food, some won't. Some have very good music. They'll have some entertainment. But it's kind of like the old days when they had the pubs were kind of a meeting area and stuff. But Colorado has got some of the best breweries I've ever been into. They're always good tasting beer, and there's plenty of them. The city we get to go visit, Colorado Springs, wow. There's a whole bunch of breweries there. You go to Denver, there's a bunch of breweries. You go to Fort Collins, there's breweries. You go all over the state. And they're blessed with some of the best water in the country. Because of that water, they make good beer.
Yeah, let's talk about Coors, that they always advertise the fact that they have, good beer because of the cool mountain water that travels through the area. And, what is the way you would describe Coors, Dad? Inform the audience.
Well, I always get a kick out of, they talk about Coors, Budweiser, Miller. All three of those big things were German immigrants that came to the United States to make beer in the purest of German traditions. Well, as I always like to say, the German purity laws of 1516 state that only 4 ingredients are to be in a beer, and that's water, hops, yeast, barley. And you go to Coors, and they use all those ingredients plus rice. Budweiser, I believe, uses rice too. I think Miller uses corn. And so it's not quite in the purest of German tradition that they make their beers. So I wish they wouldn't advertise that.
Yeah, you're not a big fan of Coors.
Oh, I like their beer.
Although you liked old Coors.
Oh, yeah. So when we go cross country way back in the day, again, with my family, my parents would always pick up a 12-pack or a beer along the way, and they would have a couple beers at night when we were staying at the hotel. And they'd give us each a little glass just to taste it, whatever. But we would taste that beer, and it had such a unique flavor. I've yet to have a beer that has had that flavor. And I don't know what Coors did. I think it was when they pasteurized. But prior to doing that, they had the most flavorful beer ever had. They made a whole movie because of Coors beer. Smokey and the Bandit.
Oh, yes.
Getting beer to Georgia and stuff. But that's, Coors really used to have a unique taste. Now, some of their new beers coming out are really good. I like their Colorado Native. That's a very good beer out there. But it's not the same tasting as it was way back in the day.
Damn kids with their fancy new beers.
Yeah, I remember you would tell me about how, before they would pasteurize it, it was like a really good beer, nowadays, what is your go-to beer?
Well, Well, one other thing is this Coors, and then we can go to that. With one thing I used to love to do is come up to Golden, Colorado, because the Coors Brewery was kind of nestled in the mountains, and
Yeah.
it's a pretty area in Golden, and plus it's nice. Again, it's one of your scenic towns, plus a lot of things to do in Golden. But you'd have to wait in line to get in a tour, and it was waiting longer in the line to go to a tour, and then they started cutting back on their little free samples, and then they started charging to go on it and giving you less free samples. And I'm kind of, being charged to go through there and tour, I'm kind of like, that's when I stopped going to the Coors Brewery. There's a couple nice microbreweries right outside their door, though.
True. I mean, there are a lot of nice breweries out in Colorado. A lot of mountain breweries. Like one that I would personally advertise is Fossil Brewery.
Oh, absolutely. That's in Colorado Springs. People there are great. Beer there is great.
That's a good price too.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot of different. There's a lot of different breweries. There's also a Colorado Mountain Brewery. That's a really good place. I think they also have like a pizza oven as well, if you're into that, because what goes great with beer but pizza.
Oh, pizza. They got their burgers, their different foods and stuff. Very good. But yes, they have they have their standard 6 beers there, and that's just every time I go there, great beer.
So since we're talking about like different breweries in Colorado, the microbreweries, what is the one microbrewery that you did not like? Like, what is the one that you're like, I could have gone my entire life without trying it?
I'm not going to say it. There is one, but
You don't want to be that person.
I don't want to be that person. But, yeah, there was a brewery. I won't say its name or whatever, but your mom and I had gone out to, and I won't say the area because then you know where it's at, but we had their beer, and I mean, I've had bad beer in my life, but I always try to finish it. Because I hate wasting money to buy a beer. It's like, yeah, I'll just kind of hold my nose. I was like 2 or 3 sips in this, and I was like, I can't drink this. It is that bad. It was horrible beer.
Like, what made it so bad?
Well, a lot of Weiss beer, wheat beer.
Okay.
They put a little bit of like Line and Kugel's had summer shanty.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is big like a summer shanty, but they put orange in there. Well, the intent is to have a hint of orange, give it a little taste and stuff. And like somebody took a pitcher of orange juice and poured it in there and added a little beer.
Dear.
It was not good.
So, in this case, now we're looking at the purity laws where you're like, because again, like talking about those, I call them the Munich purity laws because those laws were instilled in the city of Munich in Germany. But in this case, you're like, you can't add fruit to beer. And this is something that Daddysquatch and I, constantly go back and forth, because he likes to give me shit for drinking beer that has fruit in it, like the Berry Wise made by Leinenkugel's.
Yeah, I do, but at the end of the day, if you think about it, you hear the German purity laws, but yet the Weiss beer is German. It's made with wheat, and it has a little bit of lemon into it, and you're kind of like, wait, you guys made up this purity law, but yet you allow this to be made with wheat. So I take it with, tongue in cheek, but I just say when people do it in the traditional German way, especially like a Pilsner, that is under Munich rules and stuff. But, no, definitely go out there and try some microbreweries. You'd be, it's a good way to, meet people and taste the local wares.
Yeah, plus it's, an opportunity to, because, like, no 2 beers are ever the same. You get a variety of the different recipes and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
So, as the episode or as the series that I've talked about entails, OK Boomer, OK Zoomer, it is the conversations that we have with one another that, within people of the boomer generation and the zoomer generation. And I think this is something that we all can relate to, which is of people of Gen Z, which is having to deal with, old people like, you kids don't know how good you have it now. You don't know how good you have it. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have avocado toast, So, in regards to, vacation stuff, you would tell me some stories about what it was like to travel cross-country, Daddysquatch. So, you tell me, some differences in, methods of travel, for example, because you did tell me this one story, but I think it would be enlightening for the audience to tell the story.
Well, growing up, grew up in a family with a lot of kids. The cars that we could use at that time to hold that many kids was a station wagon. Now, I know you don't see station wagons around today. They've been replaced by SUVs. So back in the day, if you had a big family, you had a station wagon. That was the only way of carrying everybody.
So, basically would you say every station wagon back then was like the Vista Cruiser from that 70s show?
Very close to it. Yeah. So, remember, seatbelt laws in there were more optional than they were mandatory. So, we typically would cram up a station wagon with 3 sitting in front, 3 sitting in the back seat, and then 2 sitting way back in the cargo area of the station wagon. That was usually the smallest or the youngest because the only ones that could fit back there. My dad had built a car top carrier that we would attach to the top of the station wagon. In there we could put suitcases, sleeping bags, all that. And the balance of the stuff was in the storage area. And then my mom always had a big picnic basket and we'd have a big cooler. So really the opportune time of driving, and you got to remember now too, the only radio stations were AM. There were no cassette tapes. There were no, well, I shouldn't even say that. You probably don't know what that is. Or CD players or DVD players. Or it was an AM radio and that was it. So entertainment in the car, traveling from one part of the country to the other was extremely limited. So typically we'd have, of course, at that time comic books, and later on during the trip, our favorite thing was to get a National Enquirer magazine or newspaper and read all the stories there. Now, today's National Enquirer is all about what's happening in Hollywood, who's suing who's doing what. But back then, National Enquirer was aliens have invaded here, my mother married a Bigfoot, sea bears live...
Oh yeah, that episode of the SpongeBob, it says so in the Bikini Bottom Inquirer. I married a sea bear. Yeah, and Fake Science Monthly. Sea bears and fairy tales are real. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Well, it may be stupid, but it's also dumb.
But, so we get in the car now. Most of the time, even the cars back then, most did not have air conditioning. That was a luxury. Most didn't have cruise control. That was a luxury. So driving cross country was a little, during the summertime we were going cross country. It was hot. The car was definitely, if we hit areas that were 100 degrees, well, the car was 105 degrees. The windows were open, helped it get cooled off by that, but it was miserable driving cross country sometimes. But that's why my parents would always, they'd see these little areas to stop and just to get out of the car and stretch and look, there's the devil down in the hole. Ooh, scary. We'd all laugh about it for the next 100 miles. A funny thing with my dad, though, he had a kind of that weird sense of humor, is for some reason my oldest brother decided to have this tradition that every time we cross the Missouri River, we would hold our breath while we're driving across, see if we can hold our breath, because it took like a minute and a half, 2 minutes to get across the bridge. So we'd all sit there, we'd all kind of hyperventilate, and we get to the edge, and we hold our breath. And then my dad would hear us hold the breath, and he'd drop from, and at that time it was 55 miles an hour to go on the highway, but he'd drop it to, he was doing 60, he'd drop it to 55, 50, 45.
Oh, God.
He'd go slower and slower across the bridge, and we're like, ooh!
So, as far as, different methods of travel, obviously, back in the day, there was no airlines, or, well, there were airlines, but it was, luxury kind of thing.
Very luxury. The other thing too is when we're traveling cross country, very rarely do we stop for when we stop for lunch, or even for breakfast and stuff. This is not going to Denny's or going to McDonald's. We'd stop at a rest area, and then my mom would bring out the picnic basket. We'd get a sandwich. She'd have a bag of chips. We could have some chips in there, and then we could split a soda between the kids and stuff. And it was the same thing as far as in the morning. In the evening, my parents were done driving. They'd usually find a motel, but then we'd have to duck, 3 or 4 of the kids hide down there. So my dad, when he was going in there and saying, "Well, all I got is 3 kids," so we'd sneak into the hotel room, and usually we'd crash. A lot of us crash on the floor. We get some sleeping bags, and that's how we do the evening. So sitting in Hampton Inns and getting up in the morning and having a nice buffet breakfast that you can go get to. My mom bought little boxes of those Kellogg's cereal. So we get each a little box of cereal, milk, and that was breakfast. And a piece of fruit.
And Tang.
Thank you for reminding me. Yes, we did have Tang.
Tang, it's the drink that every astronaut drinks. And it's just like really watered down orange juice.
Yeah, Tang is, well, see, it wasn't as watered down unless my mother would make it, because she would make it stretch even farther. So, you don't need the full strength. Half strength's good for you.
God rest, Grandma, she's a very lovely woman, but, because one of the things you always told me was that she really knew how to stretch a budget.
Well, she had to. It was a lot of things. At the end of the day, none of us went hungry. None of us starved. It's just, we kind of laugh at it back then. But, the thing she did with Tang was, she thinned it down, but she also kept it very cold. And you'll find out that most drinks, when you serve them ice cold, you could care less what they tasted like when you're out in 100-degree weather. When you come out of air conditioning, it's like there's no air conditioning, so you drink that down. I could care less what taste it was. It was like, wow, this is great. But,
that they say, that hunger is the spice of life, yes. And that, and I guess that also applies to, drinks when you're thirsty.
But, we got there, it was fun to go. Like I said, each of us have books or comic books or National Enquirer stuff. But the other thing, too, was my brother and I always had a map. We were always using the map to see where we're at, follow it, kind of predict what route we're going to take. And we knew that if we took this way in the highway, we're going to be taking that route. And if we took this way, we'd taken that route. Usually my dad was pretty consistent about how he'd do it, but sometimes he'd go off and he'd say, "Hey, let's go take a look at something special on the way there, on the way back." And there's times we went to Yellowstone Park and we'd spend a couple days in Yellowstone. That was always a treat. Other different parks, but my parents really showed us the country from a ground level.
Yeah,
and I never regret that. I could tell you, if you say a state, I can imagine being in that state, and I know what to expect and how it looks, and I owe that to my parents. But as far as today's road trips, they're a little bit different.
Well, going back to what you said with the maps, how you would have those big maps, that you would read through. I would say that I grew up on the tail end of that generation of carrying the big maps, and you would always tell me that I would read all those maps, and that at one point I used to know all the state capitals.
Yeah, we had the big book that would have all the maps were in one big book, but back in the day, you'd stop at a gas station, and for a quarter, or they'd even hand them out as kind of a thing. If you got a full tank of gas, they'd hand you out, a traveling map, and it was just a folded map. And you had to fold it a certain way in order for it to collapse and come back open. But that was a nice map to have. But like I said, with today, just think of the trip we went down to when you were younger, going to Florida. We had a minivan. I had DVD players in there. It was air conditioned.
Yeah, it was.
You could stretch out. You guys could sleep in there comfortably. And
let's on the sleep comfortably thing. Maybe. So this is something that I don't know why, but I can't fall asleep in a car. Like, depends on the van. Like, are we talking that black van that we used to own? Or are we talking about, the car that we took when we were going to Colorado last time? Because it was not easy to sleep in that.
Well, you got to remember, too, the last time we went to Colorado, we took the car. You were going on the trip at that time. We didn't know you were going to go on the trip. So your mother and I got the cheapest economy car we could get a hold of. And unfortunately, we were thinking about trading it, but we were also renting at the time of EAA. So by renting it at the time of EAA, we, didn't think that we could get another car or they would have jacked up the price. So unfortunately, yeah, that was not the comfortable car. But think about when we had that green minivan, you had the big captain's chairs, you could sleep in that comfortably.
Okay, then egg on me on that one.
All right.
So, yeah, I don't know why, I, for the life of me, can't fall asleep in a car. It's pretty difficult, because the thing about falling asleep in a car, and I'll explain this, is that there are two things. It's about the appropriate angle, because the human body, in order to get it to sleep, you have to be able to raise your legs, you got to make sure to try to get, to flatten it out. And getting an angle like that is very difficult to accomplish. You try sleeping onto the passenger door, and it's can't do that. There is this weird plastic bit that's jutting into my stomach. Okay, then I'll try to lean over, try to create a pile of pillows that I'm now my spine is arching in a weird direction. That is something I wish I had, was the ability to fall asleep into a car, because...
Well, think about being in a station wagon in the back seat with 3 people, and there is no way you could go this way or that way, because as soon as you try to fall asleep and you lean on your brother or your sister next to you, they go, "Get up!" And that was, they always wanted to have the window seat, because the person at the window seat had the ability to lean at least against the window and get a little sleep, but the one that was stuck in the middle was suffering. One, because they had nowhere to put their head, but they also, in the middle of it, was the hump for the drive shaft of the engine to go through. So they had this hump they had to put their legs up on. So it was always a fight of who got to sit in the middle. And the older siblings would always say, "Not me. The little ones will sit in there."
Yeah, I mean, I saw this one picture online of new passenger airline seats where it's just there's just so little room, and I'm at that point, airlines may as well just be subway trains where you're just holding them from the top and just standing at that point. If you're going to make me sit on something like that, I will demand, a significantly reduced price, because you know why airlines are doing that. They're trying to make as much money as they can. And I'm thinking about that, and it's just oh dear God.
Well, I mean, take a look at cut rate airlines today, Another method of traveling now, we employ this, we get a card and we get points for Frontier Airline. And the intent of with Frontier is driving cross country to visit my sister, or my daughter, Ghantt Chart's sister, would take us anywhere from 18 to 20 some hours to go one way. Versus we can get on an airliner and in 2.5 hours, plump, we're there. It takes money or points, but it saves you time. And although I will have to admit, flying out of Denver in the summertime in the afternoon, be beware, because it's pretty bad when we get at the end of the runway before we take off. The pilot, and it's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it's 100-some degrees out. The pilot says, "Oh, by the way, it's going to be a bumpy ride from here to Nebraska. Just letting you know." You take off, and because of the air turbulence, the hot air and the mountain air coming in, that plane ride to Nebraska was just yee.
Well, I mean, they call it Tornado Alley for a reason.
I know, but that was just horrible.
I mean, I remember, with the back of the plane, that you would have those different pictures of different animals, and our plane had a deer, or a baby deer on the back, and you're just baby deer's legs need a little work, with the landing.
But, I would say as far as road trips today versus years ago, they're easier than they were years ago, but they're not as much fun as they were. I mean, if you take a look at the old commercials for McDonald's during that time, a McDonald's hamburger, 10 cents, with cheese, 15 cents.
I mean, did you guys ever stop at McDonald's, and, I remember you told me that, that back in the day, that going to fast food was like a treat. You always told me that once a year you and, my uncles and aunts would have, a KFC dinner, and that was considered a specialty.
Yeah, it was, at that time, again, my parents, it was tough to go to fast food, but in the town I grew up in, there wasn't much for fast food. The only fast food in there was KFC, and I don't consider that really quite as fast food. I mean, there was no McDonald's, there was no Burger King, no Arby's, no Hardee's. None of those things were in there. If you wanted to go to a burger, there was kind of like Dairy Queen places that you could get a burger at, but they weren't that good and they were very expensive. So there's sometimes we'd have to go to the big city, which was 2 hours away, so my parents could get some things or whatever. We'd all travel there because it'd be kind of a treat to go to. My parents would let us go to McDonald's or something like that. We'd all pick a place, and it was interesting when you take a look at the prices then to the prices today, and it's like, wow, for this basics.
Well, I mean, you obviously have to adjust for inflation and that regard, but I could definitely see what you mean, with adjusting for the prices, 15 cents for a cheeseburger. Plus, I imagine back in the day, you really had limited options for menu. You might have your cheeseburger, your chicken nuggets, but that's about it. None of the specialty burgers or anything like that.
I don't even think they had chicken nuggets back then. That was newer. I think at this point here, it was just basically hamburgers, cheeseburgers. I think they had a bigger hamburger. I don't even know if they had the quarter pounder yet and stuff. Those are all things that are new. But definitely food, going out to eat was, and where people think going out to eat is going to a restaurant, sit-down meal. Well, for us, it was also fast food. It was anywhere that was, that we didn't make the meals ourselves, and that was a luxury. So we didn't do that too much. I know when we went cross-country with you kids, one of the things I always try to do is get a hotel ahead breakfast.
Oh, yeah, the continental breakfast.
Continental breakfast. But usually it's a good continental breakfast. If I go to the hotel and I say, eat up. Eat a good, hearty breakfast because we're not stopping for lunch. We might get something along the way at a convenience store or whatever, and then we'll stop for dinner. So it's kind of my way of trying to, mimic my parents and saving a little bit on there because we're staying at the hotel while everybody would eat. But never fail. We want to get going on the road, and everybody's, I'm not hungry yet. It's like, I don't care. Grab some things, we'll take them on the road.
Hey, I've gotten better about it. Don't be, shaming me in our very, our audience, our, hello, 3 people, thank you for listening. I've gotten better about it.
Well, it's just, you have to eat when you can eat. I know it's not the best thing in the world, but just got to make do with what you got.
Speaking of, you got to make do with what you got, so this is a common thing, that I'm sure everybody has had, where you're on the road and you have to use the bathroom, I have to ask, when you needed to use the bathroom, try to enlighten the audience about, what you would do. Was Grandpa the kind of person who's like, okay, yeah, or it's just too bad, we're waiting for another 40 miles?
It would depend. The first thing we'd do is definitely when it gassed up, and we would have to stop for gas, he made sure everybody used the bathroom. He'd also stop at rest stops and make sure everybody used the bathroom. He was pretty adamant that every time we stopped, he'd say, whether you got to go or not, go. Get it out of your system. Because remember, one thing that hampers or gets you to want to go to the bathroom more is a bumpy car. And these older cars way back didn't have the best suspension, roads weren't the best, so you got jostled around.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But my youngest sister, she was notorious for, we'd be getting on the road about 10, 15 miles on the road. All of a sudden, I gotta go to the bathroom. And I don't know if it was because, and she would go to the bathroom there, but I think it's just nerves. My dad would sit there and he'd find a rest stop. He'd growl, but it's hard when you get back on the highway. You get up to speed, and you're trying to make some miles, and somebody says, "I gotta go to the bathroom." You gotta find a place to go to the bathroom. Now, I will admit today, or I give you guff about internet and cell phones. We use that a lot as far as traveling now. We're traveling together. It's like, you get that thing, I've got to go, or we got to switch drivers. It's nice when you can sit there, look up an app and say, where's the nearest rest stop? Because I like rest stops versus gas stations because they're easy on, easy off. So you can get into a rest stop easy, you can get out of a rest stop easy. And it's just, you don't have to buy something. You don't have to do anything. You just go in there, use the facilities, get back out. But when you get towards a big city, it never fails. The rest stops are going to be outside the city limits. So it's nice to use those apps to kind of predict and say, hey, we're going to probably switch over. Let's switch over before going to the city. There's a rest stop 20 miles outside. So kudos to the internet for that. That helps with traveling.
I mean, one thing that I remember, and you give me grief about this, was the San Francisco trip where I, took that philosophy that Grandpa would instill into you, which was to use the bathroom every chance we got. I went overboard on it, where every time we stopped at somewhere, it's like, bathroom, 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 bathroom. Okay, I'll use the bathroom. And I think you were getting kind of irritated by it, we're just like, is there something wrong? Like,
oh yeah, when we're like, it'd be one thing that's if you're, every hour or two, but it was every half hour.
I did it because I was afraid, like, how long would I don't want to be in a position where I would be in an area where I couldn't use the bathroom, so I was like, I got to make the most out of every stop.
But you think about San Francisco, it's all a bathroom.
I mean,
you can go poop on the street. You can pee on the street. They don't care.
Hey.
They have apps that tell you where the poop is at, where the pee is. To our friends in San Francisco, I'm sorry to bring that up, but it's sad. It used to be a very pretty city.
Hey, don't rag on San Francisco. We all know that the stinkiest city in the entire United States is Boston.
Why is that?
So there was this historical event. I forget when it happened, but like Boston had this giant molasses tank, which ended up falling over and breaking and creating a giant molasses flood. And, there were people that perished in the aftermath of this event, but people would say from decades onward that the stink of molasses would still permeate through Boston.
Mm.
So at the very least, San Francisco, if you're listening to this, feel good, because at least, you might have the pee, but hey, it could be worse, you might smell like molasses like Boston.
Oh, touche.
Yes. So, is there anything else that you want to talk about, or, because I feel like we're at the wrapping up point, unless...
Yes, to all the listeners out there who sit there and maybe think of there's only certain parts of this country to visit. Get in your car, take a trip, see the country. Because, or take a train. Bad thing about a plane is when you fly a plane, you fly over a lot of things in this country. This country has a lot of places to see, from the East Coast, the West Coast, the Midwest, the North, the South, Florida, all the way to California, up to Oregon, Washington, across over to Minnesota, Wisconsin, then down to the Northeast and stuff. I mean, there is so much to see, and it's so diverse. It'd be a shame to sit there and stay in a little city or the state the rest of your life, say this is the best, when it may be. And I know it's more than just looks or the scenery. You want to be with people you like and all that to make life. But go out and take a look at this country. It's spectacular. I've been to other countries, and they're spectacular too. But start with the United States. You don't need a passport.
God bless America. So that is the first episode of OK Boomer, OK Zoomer. You could find our future episodes on Spotify, and I would say that, thank you for listening, and make sure to give us a rating as far as how things are going. And yeah, thank you again. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.